Once you've got your pattern pieces all cut out, the next stage is going to be to pin them together to make sure that you're going to be able to stitch along that sewing line that we drew in earlier, and you're able to just sew straight down that line and not have to worry about measuring a certain distance from your cut edge. You can see what I mean about how my cut edges are not perfect. I don't need them to be perfect because of the fact that I've already drawn in that sewing line, which makes things a lot easier for me in the way that I sew. So this piece here is a head piece, and the first thing that I'm going to do is pin the darts, which are these pieces that we have drawn on but not actually physically cut into, because we want to have that extra bit of fabric there just to give that dart some strength. So the first step that I usually start with is to take the top point of the dart, in this case, and to put the pin through one end and out the other. So I'm pushing the pin through the corners basically of that seam. And then I'll flatten the piece and try and find the point of the dart, which is this part here where the triangle ends. And there, hopefully, my two stitch lines match up. So I'll pinch that shut, like so, move the pin and just pin it across that line. Now I usually check that I'm correct and that that line does match up by putting a second pin through the line and checking it comes out on the other side on the line, which in this case it does. Take that pin out whilst pinching the fabric together and repin it. And this is something that I'd repeat with every single dart on this piece. I tend to go through my pattern first and pin and sew every single dart before I move on to sewing any secondary seams. Now there is an exception with this case because I am making here a fairly complicated character who has different coloured legs, and therefore these require an extra piece stitched on. If it was just the red leg, you could probably do that with a pen with colour, but because the base is orange, if we try to go over that with a green pen, it would create a really sludgy kind of brownish colour rather than the bright green that we need. So I've gone for sewing those legs on first. I've done it here in white thread so that you can see. In particular, it doesn't matter with this guy because wherever he has a seam, he has a coloured line. So I'll be going over these seam lines with a pen anyway, so actually the white thread here won't show once the design is finished. So these have already been stitched on, and you always stitch on with the front side, so the fur side if you're working with a furry fabric, to front side or fur side, so right to right basically. This is a wrong side, and so is this side with the darts and everything, so I have just the same as before pinned and stitched those on. And if you were to pin together two different pieces, let's say like this arm, which you can see I've marked out, actually let's use the green one because it's got a little bit more of a clear line. This one's been marked out with white, so it's very, very pale. If you were to be pinning out a straight seam like this one, similar idea. You can use corners here to help you line up. So I'm going to use the top corner of this hand here, just there, and the back corner of this other side here. Put the pin through, line everything up. Again, we've got that dart just to check the middle line. Pinch it shut, pop the pin in, this time at a bit of a funny angle. I'll probably remove that and change it a little bit later. Get a second pin, just double check that it lines up somewhere else on the pattern, which it does. And re-pin. I'm just going to move this pin here so that the head's not sticking out, it's actually sticking in the same direction. Now because this is a larger piece, I might want to check and pin again somewhere else, and if you've got a really slippery fabric like a fur fabric, you will want to do a lot more pinning than this. Some people will prefer to tack rather than pin. I personally prefer pinning, but with a felt, because it's so grippy, you don't need quite so many pins, so this is more than ready to go in to the sewing machine, and to be honest, you could probably do without that pin there, depending on where you start your sewing. So that's pinning your fabric pieces ready for sewing in your machine.